Okay, I'd like to call the North Aurora Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March 17th, 2025 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis.
Here.
Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Nejved.
Here.
Trustee Salazar.
Here.
All right, thank you. Audience comments? See none. Trustee comments? See none. First item under discussion, item 1, Steve.
Thank you. Item number 1 tonight is our official fiscal year 25-26 budget presentation. At the last Committee of the Whole meeting, we discussed the budget overview. Once again, I want to commend our Finance Director, Jason Paprocki, who put together an excellent budget, along with our department heads who spend a lot of time. As I like to say, we have a no-nonsense approach. People typically don't ask for wild out of the blue things that you don't expect. So it's tough every year trying to pick and choose what stays in and what doesn't in the budget, but Jason does an amazing job with our staff to put it together. And the good news is everything is looking good financially for the village at this point. And with that, Jason's going to walk through each department in a little more detail.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with just a summary of all the funds. So in total budgeted revenues at first column, $42.4 million across all funds. And budget expenses and transfers, $56.6 million across all funds. Our total budget fund balance is expected to decrease $14.1 million for the year. It's really typical if you look at a lot of those big numbers there for our capital and capital projects funds. It's typical for a lot of non-general fund from year to year to save up money one year and then for a few years and kind of expend it all in one year. And that's kind of what we're seeing in a lot of these funds. Like you'll see the motor fuel tax or the capital projects or public works facility capital projects, which we'll get into in a bit here. So looking at all the revenues, as I mentioned, $42.4 million, that up far right column is what we're budgeting for the current year. Our largest revenue source is sales tax, which makes up 24% of all the revenues. So this is made up of our regular general 1% sales tax, our 3% municipal cannabis tax, the now 1% non-home rule sales tax, and then the proposed 1% grocery tax that we will propose in the next month or so. Just looking at sales tax, last year we surpassed $8.6 million. That's one of the highest we've had year to date. It's actually down a little bit. The year before we hit $8.9 million. That's kind of the highest we've ever had. This current year budget, we're projecting about $10.2 million to come in sales tax. The reason for that increase is basically due to that non-home rule sales tax went from 0.5% to 1%, so we're picking up a lot more revenue because of that. And then going into this next year, we're projecting a little over $10 million. The decrease there relates primarily to, we had some kind of one-time adjustments during the year where we saw sales tax kind of unexpectedly go up as the state was making some adjustments between use tax and sales tax. So we don't anticipate that to carry forward going into the next year. The other taxes makes up about 13% of our revenues. Primarily that line is going to be income tax, replacement tax, utilities, so gas, electric, telecom, amusement tax, video gaming, so all the kind of the smaller taxes that in total make up a fairly significant line item. The third largest revenue source to talk about is a property tax, which makes up about 13% of our revenues. Included here is our village's levy that we passed this past December, all the various special service area levies, and then the TIF fund revenue that we're expected to get. So between those three line items, that makes up about 50% of all the revenues that we're expecting to come in this current year. And then another line item, I think we've gotten questions before, is that miscellaneous/other. Really what makes that up is when you look at the police pension side, any of the money that comes in from the village, the contributions to the village or the employees kind of gets lumped in as a revenue of the village. So that kind of falls under that. That makes up a huge chunk of what the miscellaneous or other is. And then on top of that, we've got stuff like franchise fees or cell tower rent payments coming in. On the expenditure side, total expenditures, $56.6 million budgeted. Usually personnel makes up the number one largest part in the budget, but this year it's actually second because of the capital. So personnel just under $12.5 million or 22% of all expenses. The next couple slides we'll get into personnel a little bit more. Capital this year actually makes up 37% of the budget at $21 million. This is primarily due to the continuation of the construction of the Public Works facility, plus we have the water tower. Those have spanned multiple years, so huge capital numbers this year. And then the operating/other line item, that's really all of the professional services, repairs and maintenance, software, technology-based stuff
Hey,
falls into.
Jason?
Yeah,
Can we go back to personnel?
yeah.
Can you just give me a summary as to why we're $1 million higher year over year?
Yeah, I got a couple slides here that will show you. So some of it has to do with some new positions that we're proposing for the year, and then obviously the various union contracts, the step increases, non-union increases.
Is that typical? Because I'm looking at 23 to 24 and to 25, we're in that 800 to $1 million a year. I mean, that's a little concerning to me that we're seeing such a big increase as part of our budget.
Yeah, this year we're proposing more. There's probably a couple more positions than in years past we have proposed. So this year's increase definitely is more than what we've seen in years past. Yeah, but that's the primary reason for it. And if I'll actually jump right ahead, we're proposing a FTE increase of 4.07 over the prior year. That's made up of, as we mentioned, that administrative operations assistant position in the general fund. We're proposing part-time code officer, so this would be maybe 10 hours a week or so to do some supplementing of the code enforcement. We have an additional patrol officer in the police department, a part-time custodian to help out with when the new public works facility opens up to do some cleaning there. We've added some additional public works seasonal labor to help out in the field. On the water side, an additional water labor to help out there. We've also increased the hours a little bit of the part-time accounting assistant in the finance department, and then moving the streets foreman to superintendent. So those items, then along with, on the actual pay side, the Public Works Union has a 3.75% increase, sergeants 3.5%, police officers we don't know yet because they're currently under negotiation. For the non-union, 3%, then any employee who isn't at the topped out step, we're assuming that they would just move on to the next step. For some of those employees, because of a cost of living adjustment plus a step increase, you might see a 6-7% raise going for that employee. So that makes up a big part of it. On the insurance side, our HMO is increasing 6%. Our PPO is 8.8%. I think last time I had numbers in there for PPO of like 11%. We got some finalized numbers which dropped a little bit. On the dental side, no changes in the HMO, and then the PPO 4.5%. Our IMRF, which is basically the non-public safety pension employees, total budget $419,000. Our current rate, 9.52% of salary. We're projecting that to go up to 11%, and that's really just based on uncertainty of what the investments are going to do for the year. So if investments do bad, then obviously that rate will go up. So we're hoping it's not 11%, but we're just kind of assuming the worst here, or planning for the worst. So those are kind of the items that are going to make up why that personnel increase went up so much this year comparative to past years. I don't know if there's any additional questions related to the personnel.
No.
Okay. Our debt. So we have two debt issuances outstanding currently. Our 2007 bonds, which was for water capital, and then our new 2024 bonds for the public works facility. Obviously the water ones are paid by water service fees, and then the new bonds are paid by non-home rule sales tax. Total debt payment for the year between the two, $1,727,622. No new debt is assumed for the current year, so we're just going with these two. Now moving on to the general fund. For the general fund, we're projecting our sales tax at $6,922,500. So you see this is down from the current year projection of almost $431,000. Primarily what that is, as I mentioned, those one-time sales tax adjustments between use tax, and then plus I pulled out the grocery tax out of the sales tax line and made it a new line here, assuming that come January 1st, 2026, the 1% grocery tax will come in and be reported on a separate line. Our income tax continues to be a strong revenue source. We're budgeting that at $3,175,000, which is up about 1.18% or $55,000 from what our current year is. Use tax is, that's a revenue that we're projecting to drop this year because there were additional changes to laws with the state of what's considered use tax and sales tax. So it's pulling money out of the pool that gets spread to per capita statewide for use tax and then making it sales tax. So it's not necessarily going to be a one-to-one. Use tax is going to drop, sales tax will go up because it's taking out use tax that gets shared statewide, and that's going to start going to specific municipalities. So I'm not sure if we're going to see all of that, some of it, none of it. So that's going to be one of those ones that's tough, but statewide they're expecting use tax to drop significantly coming into this next year. Property tax is based on the levy we passed back in December. Building permits is one of those ones that we kind of don't know whether it's going to be really good or just an average year. Traditionally, we just kind of have budgeted to just what kind of as a typical year. But then if you look at like last year, 898,000, this year we're projecting another 950,000 coming in permits. When these large fees come in or building permits come in, they result in a really good year. But really some of those times we don't know it's going to happen or revenue is going to be like that until those things start getting in the pipeline. So we just kind of budget conservatively on the building permit side. And now just going department by department within the general fund, a lot of the increases, whether it's when you look at any of the departments, is going to be because of personnel, since personnel makes up such a large majority of what the general fund's budget is. The legislative and board budget, $106,500, that went up a little bit, $670. There's really no significant changes, and is why that one went up. We just kind of right-sized some of the fees, the meetings and dues and things to what their current actuals are. In the admin IT total budget, $1,289,640,000, which went up about $129,000. The reason for that is now we have a full year of the administrative operations assistant, and as Steve mentioned earlier, the document imaging, we went from $30,000 in the current budget up to $50,000 in this year's proposed budget. On the finance HR total budget, I got that budget number wrong, but I repeated that twice. But it did go up $27,540, and primarily due to increasing the hours on the part-time accounting assistant. Moving to the police department, total budget $8,618,000, up $694,000, primarily due to, again, the police pension contributions went up about $103,000 this year. We have an additional patrol officer, Mark 43, the document management system. This year we're proposing a new system, which is going to come with implementation and then the first year subscription of $144,000. Going forward into next year's, we're looking at about $63,000 annual, so we're taking that implementation up front. And then the dispatch fees from City of Aurora are up about $47,000 to $297 due to just some increases in the radio fees and then the call activity. On community development, $997,000 budget, up about $34,000. This includes that new part-time code enforcement officer. We had an increase of about $20,000 in inspection fees. But as those inspection fees go up, that also relates in corresponding permit revenue, because a lot of that stuff is just money that we're paying the firm to go out and inspect those things, but we're collecting on the permit side. And then software maintenance actually went down, switching from CityView to the new cloud permit this year. Moving to Public Works, $3.3 million budget, up $293,000 for the year. Saw a software increase with the new fleet management system. And then tree service, this year we had talked about really going out and being aggressive on trimming trees. It wasn't in last year's budget. It's one of those things that we knew we had some room within the budget to kind of absorb. But this year we're specifically putting it in the budget. So the tree service went up about $80,000 as we're getting out there and getting aggressive and making sure trees are trimmed on time.
If the board remembers, this was to put our neighborhoods on roughly a 7-year plan, so that we can make sure tree trimming was one of our number one complaints that we got from residents. So we were trying to get more aggressive with it. The good news is that number could still be very high. Last year's bid for trees were extremely low, so they were very favorable. And so you just don't know what the bids are going to be. So we're basing it on past bids.
So then on the non-departmental total budget, $553,000, up about $44,000 from last year. We have $60,000 for community events. This is up $15,000 from last year. I think we're up to about 12 or 13 events, so we're increasing the number of events that we're doing. And then the sales tax rebates, $425,000. We currently have 4 agreements, one with the Town Center, Gerald Ford, Gerald Genesis, and then the new Ram. Last year we had just projected that the Ram would be a partial year, but now a full year, so we're increasing that $30,000 to capture the full year. And we're able to maintain the $400,000 capital projects transfer going from the general fund to the capital projects fund for the year. Just moving and looking at the general fund balance history, the village has a policy to maintain a fund balance of 40 to 50% of expenditures and debt transfers. We're maintaining this current year. We're projected to maintain it at 63.2%. If you look at the graph there, we're showing our fund balance kind of slowly is going up each year. You know, when we look at those transfers, how to do every year, we kind of try to keep an amount in there to make sure the general fund balance is going up and maintaining through a year. But you see that red line there where our reserve percentage is actually we're projecting to go down this year from 69 to 63%. Really, that just has to do with we're kind of keeping fund balance at a level amount and not really increasing it. If we would have left all those capital transfers in there and just left it all in fund balance, we'd probably see that fund balance reserve up near 100%. But we're just keeping it at a level to where we know we're well within our policy, but then moving the money over to capital projects to where we could really use it.
Jason and I were talking about going back to the board in the future and actually looking at our fund policies and raising some of the minimum percentages. One of the things that we always try to do is keep every fund to have a healthy reserve. It helps with our bond rating and our ability to do projects that come out of nowhere, things that you don't necessarily have in your 5-year plan, and all of a sudden you have to spend $1 million on a project. Or things that cost more than you expected, like the water tower is originally budgeted at a certain amount. It came in a little bit higher, so now we have to account for that. It also includes the fact that, and Jason alluded to it earlier, we transfer money, and by transferring money from the general fund every year into the capital fund, and it helps us reduce the cost of things like the utility tax that some towns might max out, but we don't. So residents don't see the full amount that we can tax on their gas bills and on their electric bills, because we're offsetting that with the cost of our transfers from the general fund at the end of the year. The other thing too this year, as I said at the last meeting, it is not common, nor is it our practice that we want to use going forward, but to help with the water rate increase that we're doing, but to offset it to some degree, we're actually going to transfer surplus funds into the water fund this year to help prop up that reserve.
All right, moving into the capital projects fund, the main revenues that fund our capital program is the non-home rule sales tax, which is now the 1%, budgeted at $2,980,000. This is up just about $199,000 or 7.4% from last budget. That's because now we have a full year of revenue at the 1%, whereas last year we had a couple months at the 0.5% still. Electricity tax, $368,500. That's pretty flat with last year. That's one of those ones that just varies each year depending on how much people use electricity. Gas tax, we're projecting that to actually go down a little bit to $195,000. Going back a few years, we could see that revenue in the $220,000, $230,000. But these last couple of years, we've seen it closer to that $190,000. So that's one of those ones that just fluctuates year by year based on how warm of a winter we have. So we're just bringing that down to just where the levels that we've seen these past couple of years.
And to clarify that, that's natural gas for heating bills on NICOR bills, not gas. We do not have an actual gasoline tax.
Yes, correct. And then I mentioned earlier that $400,000 transfer coming in from the general fund to help fund capital. Some of the major projects or things within the expenditure side of the capital projects fund, we're budgeting $4.5 million to come out of the capital projects fund and move over to the public works facility capital projects fund. So that project was always meant to be financed by some debt, some reserve balance. So we'll see $4.5 million go over there this year. Annual road program, we're actually splitting it this year with the motor fuel tax. We had built up a reserve in the motor fuel tax fund. We had some Rebuild Illinois money that we had to spend this year. And a lot of the projects within the MFT fund were kind of getting delayed. So we said we'll spend that money on the road program and kind of ease how much money is coming out of the capital projects fund and utilize that. We still have our public works facility engineering, design, construction management, $639,000. Police department boiler replacement, $160,000. looking at.
Jason, why does the police department need a new boiler? The building's what, not even 20 years old? What's going on with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, times kind of changed since that boiler was installed. It was kind of installed at a point where boilers kind of moved forward. So that original boiler was kind of old at the time it was put in, per se, for I guess it's just the timing of it. So it was kind of, as these boilers kind of fade, the new ones come in, and we were at the end of like the fading generation of the old boilers.
But what's
So
wrong with it? I mean,
it cycles so much.
We can't maintain it? I mean,
The boiler at the police department runs 365 days a year, so it tempers the building. So when the air conditioning's running, it actually heats some of the air to create humidity. So, I mean, it basically runs all the time.
So what's the anticipated lifespan of a boiler for that building?
What we've been told is anywhere from 15 to 20 years, and it's right at 15 years.
And we can't replace it? I mean, we can't fix it? We can't do
We've
with what we have?
spent tens of thousands of dollars fixing them over the past few years. So the more money we put in there, it's just eating away at that. It's a similar project we have now is replacing the HVAC units on the roof. Those have a 10 to 15 year lifespan, and we're looking to replace 5 of them currently in this year's budget.
Interesting.
Yeah, Brian kind of stole my thunder. No, it's good. I was gonna mention that you're actually gonna see HVAC bid come in for 5 of the 7 units at the police department now. We have HVAC people constantly at the police department for the last 2-3 years. Joe deals with leaking roofs all the time, partially caused by the HVAC units, and 1 or 2 of them is constantly breaking down and having to replace it. So the amount of money we're spending on maintenance is pretty interesting. But I think the one thing that going forward with our new public works building is what we've learned from the building of the police department, not to say that the building is wrong, but one thing that we learned was that our HVAC units will be on the ground at the public works building so that they'll be easily maintained and they won't have worries about condensation dripping back into the building.
Okay, we have $200,000 in there. Looking at this, the lift right out here, outside these doors here, to see if we can replace that or fix that. The fire training facility near the East Water Treatment Plant, relocating their electric service off of that the treatment plant, $140,000. New message board for the village. This is within this current year budget. We didn't get to that because we're still trying to find the location. So again, we're carrying that over, $75,000, and then starting phase 1 of the Veterans Memorial, $675,000.
Hey, Jason, not
Yeah.
to keep interrupting, but
Okay.
going back to the lift.
Yeah.
$200,000 to replace that lift?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of blows me away. I mean, I do a lot of new construction on multifamily buildings, and to put an elevator in, an elevator is not even half that much. Why is it so expensive?
If we go to redo a lift, we have an architect currently looking at it. Brandon's been researching it for a while. They don't make that.
It's one floor.
It is. The issue is that
How often do we use it?
not often, probably once every 5-6
Why
months.
can't we just keep what we have?
Well, the one right now is breaking, so like we actually lost a button to make it go up and down, and we couldn't even find a repair part for it. So at this point, we've called several businesses. No one wants to maintain it because it's out of date and it's old. So unfortunately, if you change anything to do it because of the ADA compliancy, the rules have changed. So right now, any upgrade to that would require almost a reconfiguration and a rebuilding of the entire lift and the shaft and everything that goes into it, because it's not wide enough for wheelchair access and it doesn't have the proper ramping. So I'm not gonna lie to you, when we looked at that and we started getting pricing, all of us said, I can't believe how expensive it is to fix or repair or replace this lift.
And there's only a few companies that do that, isn't it?
Correct. So
it's another
right now, all we're doing right now is preliminary. It's in the budget just in case, but if it does break, we will not have an ADA compliant lift in our building, which means we'll have to come up with an accommodation for board meetings and everything like that.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is get ahead of it, get a report that at least shows what we would need to do. And because we had such a hard time getting lift companies to come out here to actually price it out and show us what they would do, because it requires a reconfiguration to ADA compliancy, basically everybody would bid on a plan, but they're not going to sit there and show you exactly how they would build it, because they don't want you to take their proprietary data and then give it to another company. So you have to almost bid it, like get a bid spec prepared, bid it, and see what the results are. So we're just at the initial stage of Williams Architect, the architect that we're using currently at our building for the Public Works facility. We asked them to come in and do an assessment first. That's where we're at right now.
Okay, moving on to the water fund. As mentioned previously, we are proposing a increase in the water rate from $4.79 to $5.95 per 1,000 gallons. We are not proposing any change to the minimum monthly, the $16 for the first 3,000 gallons billed by monthly. Water usage, we now project 3,708,000, which is up 726,000 from last year. We do have a large water connection fee with a large water user we're projecting coming in this next year. But again, we did increase rates recently, or connection fee rates recently, which we've worked into the budget as well. And then our water tower rentals, so this is the cell towers that are on the actual towers, $147,950, up a little from last year, mainly just because those contracts have annual increases in them. On the expenditure side, mentioned the new water labor position. We have some MIOX cell replacements at the West Treatment Plant and East Treatment Plant, $190,000. I believe this is what mixes the chemicals that helps purify the water. Electricity, $550,000, up $100,000 from last year. We're continuing to see electricity rates, especially on the water treatment and in the wells, increase significantly from year to year. Debt principal, $390,000, interest, $102,775, and we have $4.1 million of planned capital, primarily because of the continuation of the central water tower. That's a project that spans 3 years, this current year, next year, and probably a little the following year. So we have about $3.1 million in this next year. We have some upgrades to our treatment plants, the HMO system improvements, $450,000, a carryover of the electrical upgrades at the West Treatment Plant, and then starting electrical upgrades at the East Treatment Plant, $300,000, and a carryover of our SCADA system upgrade. That's a project that was approved and is going on in this current budget year, but probably won't finish this year and carry over a little bit into next year. On the vehicle and equipment fund, annual funding. So this comes from all the various departments, everybody who has vehicles and equipment. Each department puts in a little bit of money into this fund each year for future use or future purchases. $610,395 is how much money is coming in to this fund from the various funds and departments. Some new vehicles requested this year: a 1-ton dump truck for the Public Works streets, $145,000. We had purchased this Freightliner in previous on order. So this is just the salt spreader and the anti-ice for the Freightliner, $235,000. We should have the vehicle, the actual truck. Yep.
Didn't we just buy a bunch of new equipment for Public Works within the past 4 or 5 years? I mean,
This particular one has been in the budget for, I think, a year or two now, then it just keeps getting delayed, so we've carried it over. I'm not sure when the last one, was it 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, this one's actually been carried over for 2 years. We just found a way to purchase the truck this year. The truck will be delivered by June 1st. So the original one was the original was not to exceed like $350. So this is just that when we get the truck, it will go get outfitted. So we had to split it up because it just seems like it takes forever.
I remember back in the day, we used to do a lot, with less. And I just want to make sure that we're not, things are not wants instead of needs at this point, because we've extended ourselves with the new Public Works facility. And I'd like to see, us keeping an eye on things that maybe we can, wait a couple of years or wait a year or two.
Yeah, these should be, after this purchase of this truck, we probably won't need a 5-year dump truck for another 3 to 5 years. So you'll see the vehicle purchases less in the forthcoming years.
What's hard to see is some of these are offsets too. So the water fund employee, this is going back to personnel. The people that were added back in here is primarily because we are doing, more with less. We have more events now. We do 12 to 15 events a year. We had one person doing all of our events, all of our communications, all of our administrative work internally. Mike Toth, when he became business service manager, took about 25% of that job away by doing liquor licenses and tobacco licensing, which does take up a month or two of the season of the year. And then you're hiring back. We don't have an executive assistant, which was that original position. and every other town does. And so we're trying to hire back that person to do that stuff, and then have that person also do special events, communications, and back up Natalie. So you have that, then you have the purposes here, and we are absolutely cognizant whenever we ask for anything. So you go to all the personnel requests this year, and the first thing I said to Jason is, that's a lot of personnel, because we both look at it and said, that's a lot. But you also look at the timing of things. We're probably at the last water person that we're gonna need for a while. That water person's salary is offsetting $60,000 that was put in the budget for valve exercising and hydrant flushing and things like that we were gonna hire a private company to do. Now we're gonna do those things in-house with that person. That person is now another person that can assist in plowing. The 5-yard dump trucks, we've got to a point since I've been here with the staff that we've added at Public Works, we've added an effective number of large dumps after this one to basically now have, this is the first year I think that we had enough streets division employees to actually plow every route in North Aurora and not rely on a third-party company. So we rely on Tri-County still for cul-de-sacs. They help out with our large route, which is Randall Road and Orchard Gateway and those bigger streets. But now we have every neighborhood is done by a village employee. And then what you're also starting to see is that the trucks are changing. We're not buying, as you see this as a 1-ton dump. So in the past, when you get to, just like you have an effective staffing level, you have an effective vehicle level. And now, instead of buying, if you remember, used to buy $90,000 vehicles for our water department that were basically trucks and pickup trucks and utility trucks mixed into one. Now you're buying just a regular pickup truck because we have enough of those with the houses on the back that house all the tools for water main breaks and things like that. We eliminated a specialty vehicle that we use for water main breaks, and just instead we retrofitted a couple of our existing vehicles. So what you're seeing now is as we add people in water, you're seeing them get regular pickup trucks for just house calls when they're going out changing out meters at somebody's house. And then what you're looking at with that 1-ton dump, we have 2 1-ton dumps right now. They actually are on plow routes. So even though they aren't as big as a 5-yard dump, Brian has them dedicated to full-time routes during plowing operations. Now, the water department with their extra person, they will get one of those old 1-ton dumps, and that will go to the water department so they can use it for water main breaks and things like that, hauling spoils. So, you know, we're repurposing a lot of stuff, but I think that's the thing too, is when you have a public works building, so we talked about we have 1 full-time employee doing custodial. It's not enough to do 3 big buildings for 1 person. So talk about 15, 20 hours of another person. And then you talk about the police department. When we made the decision to put a full-time officer in the school district, which by the way, Joe will tell you, there is, you know, Jewel's a great school, but it also does have a need for an officer. And that takes away 1 person from the street for 50% of the year, you know, 9 months of the year. This essentially replaces our full patrol level back to what it was prior to that SRO going full-time in the school. And the school district is paying over 40% of that person's salary. So yes, we're adding an officer back in, but we're also getting 40% of the other officer's salary paid. So it looks like a lot. And then the code enforcement, you're talking about 10 hours. It's not a ton. The big issue with code enforcement that keeps coming up is things on the weekends. I call it the big 4. Cars parked on the grass, signs in the right-of-way, watering restrictions, and RV parking, you know, commercial vehicle parking in driveways. And that's where, you know, Marcy works a 40-hour week. She's not here on nights and weekends very often. So this goes back to how we used to have it, where we have somebody maybe come in on a night for a few hours or on a weekend morning for a few hours. But the one thing I don't see is a lot of employees coming on in the future, because I think we're finally up to that point where we're getting to an effective staffing level. And our town's grown a few thousand people in the last few years, so the services have changed.
I just want to add too, as well as I think the demand from the board here and, you know, the residents, you know, they expect services, and I think we're catching up to the point now where we can provide those services, if it's with plowing or the water department or code enforcement. You know, we used to have a secondary code enforcement person, and we're going to add one back to it. So I feel you guys are efficiently and then some utilizing employees. I know you shuffled about last year, 4 or 5 employees. One went to the police department to help them out, and you did this and did that to, you know, accommodate and save probably $100,000 plus bringing in-house engineering in. We have our own engineers. I mean, that saved a ton of money from our, well, at that time it was Rempy Sharp. But, no, I think you guys really do a good job scrutinizing it, and then I hear the debates and the questions, and, so anyway, but like good plow trucks, I mean, we have some ones I see sitting on the side of the road that are probably 20 years old during a snowstorm that they don't work. That doesn't do anybody any good, because we'll get the phone calls that my street's not done, it's not salted, whatever. So, yeah, everything's expensive. I mean, but just kind of the sign of the times. But I feel they're doing a good job, so thank you.
And I think Brian made a good point, too. The amount of trucks that you're seeing here, it was taking 2 years, 3 years to get some of these trucks. So, we actually canceled the order we had for our last 5-yard after it sat for, I think, a year and a half with the place that won the bid. And that person said that at the time we canceled, they couldn't even guarantee, I think we were still over 100 on the list of an order of the get one, and they couldn't even guarantee we would have it in 6 months to a year from then. So, the problem is a lot of times what we're doing is we are looking at ways to be more efficient. Unfortunately, what that's caused is sometimes with these delays, we've canceled contracts, paid a little money, but gotten in a vehicle maybe a year or two
Try to fill the
earlier.
gap, right.
But I think
yeah.
we're in a good spot with vehicles and employees going forward.
Thank you.
I can speak to the plowing is that I have people call me from Aurora and say, I wish they live in North Aurora. Our plows come out immediately and the snow is removed. Can't take that for granted. If they need a new truck, they need a new truck. I mean, that's just part of the process.
And it used to be half as much, 5 years ago. Now it's just the price is escalating. It's just crazy. But you're up, Jason.
All right. So just a couple pieces of equipment as well. Forklift for the new Public Works facility, $30,000. Asphalt spreader for an existing Public Works truck, $65,000. Some IT servers, $40,000. And then upgrading the village boardroom and then the police department audio, video, visual, $60,000. And then just jumping into some of the kind of not major funds here. Motor fuel tax fund, expecting total revenue, $837,000. Some major operating budget items, salt, $30,000. Street and alley repairs, $120,000. And streetlight maintenance, $83,000. On the capital side, Orchard Gateway resurfacing, $650,000 we're budgeting. And I'd mentioned that Rebuild Illinois funds that we had. We're using $765,000 of that on the 2025 road program. Going into the Route 31 TIF, this is the final year of the TIF. So if we have projects or facade grants that come up, we'll spend the money. If not, we're planning on porting over potentially up to $1.3 million over into the United TIF Fund. Within the United TIF Fund, we're really seeing property tax revenue increase, budgeting based on the EAV within that TIF, budgeting $1.6 million to come in. I will point out, though, that we have that existing developer note within the TIF, so we're projecting to pay out $620,000 back to the developer for their portion of the tax bill. So net about $1 million of tax revenue coming in on the United TIF, which we're planning on some property purchases of around $1 million. We have some areas we're targeting to try to see if we can acquire property. And then we have the airport and Route 31 intersection and traffic signal, $715,000, 500 of which will be offset by a DCO grant that we have. The insurance fund, our liability insurance, we're projecting at $425,000. On the tourism fund, we are projecting a budgeted decrease of hotel tax just because with the My Place Hotel possibly going to the apartment building or the senior residential, we're showing a decrease in tax revenue coming in. 90% of that revenue is remitted to the Tourism Council, so we're projecting that at $91,800. North Aurora Days, we're projecting at a break even of $65,000 revenue coming in and $65,000 of expenditures. We've gotten off to a good start with some people reaching out about sponsorship, so we're expecting that to kind of go up this year versus last year. Within the special service area funds, we have the Oak Hill Shoreline Stabilization Project, $385,600. Waterford Oaks, we're planning some pond drainage improvements of $45,000, and then we have the normal town center wetland basin maintenance of $25,000. Within the sanitary sewer fund, we're planning on some sewer repairs and improvements of about $200,000 and some cleaning and televising of $75,000. The newly created Public Works Capital Projects Fund, This is just the remaining construction equipment within the fund. We're projecting about $10,256,000 to finish that project. Then the debt on the new to fund of that project is within the new Public Works Facility Debt Service Fund. We have the total principal and interest, $585,000 for principal, $649,000 for interest. Money comes into that fund from our capital projects fund, so any of the non-home rule sales tax money that we receive within there, the amount related to debt, we transfer out of capital projects into this fund to cover the debt. And then on the police pension fund, just our normal service, disability, and surviving spouse pensions, just over $2 million of pension benefits budgeted out of that fund. As far as the remaining timeline for the budget, we'll come back with the committee of the whole meetings in April, the 7th and 21st, and update any portions of the budget that things have changed. Maybe we've gotten newer updated numbers that we want to change. We'll have our official public hearing on the 21st, and then May 5th is when we'll come back to actually pass the budget. I did mention we'll propose a grocery tax ordinance on May 5th as well. This would be putting on the village's 1% grocery tax effective January 1st, 26th that the state will eliminate from sales tax revenue. And then our water rate ordinance to increase the rates come May 5th. So we'll try to do everything on May 5th related to the budget. If there's any additional questions.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
That ends our discussion. Motion adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Have a good night.
Thank you.